That cheerful-looking guy is Richard Byrd, who in 1926, after his first flight over the North Pole, and I want to share with you some of the people that populate the National Geographic world. But before I do that, I want to show you what all of the explorers have carried since 1903, when Elsie Bell Grosvenor, who was the wife of the founder of the society, stitched this flag. It's very precious to us. It's a real symbol. And this coming year, National Geographic celebrates its 125th birthday. We start off a year-long celebration around the year of exploration. Like many of you, I was introduced to the idea of exploration by the National Geographic. I was inspired by the tales of people like Roy Chapman, who basically made the biggest discovery of dinosaur bones in the world in the Gobi Desert. Richard Perry, who was the first guy to go to the North Pole, we think. Hiram Bingham, who found Machu Picchu. He was on assignment for National Geographic. Charles Lindbergh, you all know, I'm sure. Jacques Cousteau, who I grew up watching every Sunday as he went around the world. And others like these couple. I'll tell you about this in a moment, but I want to say something about explorers. They're as important as inventors. They tip the table, they change the game. They thrill us, they change us, and they give us a way to see the world and ourselves in a different way. They soften us to the unexpected, the strange, the different, what I call the other. The astonishing thing about exploration, the people who do it, what they discover, where they go, is it's bottomless. It is something that drives us. We can't avoid it. Now, National Geographic has been to discovery what probably the Vatican has been to art. We are one of the great benefactors with an early foothold in the game. So let's take a little fun trip through our archives. Now, understand, I can only show you about 1/1,000,000th of what we have. And frankly, it's a lot to do with the rights that we own to some of these pictures. But a long time ago, some folks joked that we beat Playboy to their game. We published the first bare-breasted women in a magazine. Now, this Zulu bride and groom was published in National Geographic in 1896. The remarkable thing is that this is really culture unvarnished. And what our correspondent wrote about these guys was they possess some excellent traits, but they are horribly cruel once they have smelled blood. I guess that's good corporate training. This is Charles Martin took this in 1920 for us. It's a picture of the Lalinga province chiefs in Africa meeting technology head on. The shot I'm actually not showing you that he also took for the same article is another head-on collision of sorts. It's a Fuego headhunter who is tied up on a long stick, and he has lost his head, and he's on his way to be eaten. This is 1931, a camel caravan supporting the Citroën Heart expedition. Even back then, we had corporate sponsors. That followed much of Marco Polo's explorations of Asia that he had done more than 6 centuries earlier. This is in the mountains of western China. This is one of our great photographers, epitome of the National Geographic photographer, scouring the ocean bottom for the remains of HMS Bounty in 1952. He wrote then, "Those were the halcyon days when the undersea world was new and lay all before us, waiting to be discovered. Every dive was like a visit to the new planet." He had an expense account book with a line, "Gifts for the natives." And he had one thing that, and I'm going to be a little bit politically incorrect, but it's the truth. What all of our explorers carried in those days was what was called the Dago Dazzler. It was a big, very fancy document embossed that basically gave the rights to whoever was representing the society to enter the great depths of the unknown. It impressed the natives. This is Tom Abercrombie in 1957 at the South Pole. The temperature was minus 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Until then, the coldest temperature ever recorded. He once told me a great story of our accounting department. He'd come back from Yemen. He had to buy a AK-47. The accountant said, this is ridiculous, we don't pay for AK-47s. He said, but this was for my protection. They said, we're not going to reimburse you. He went back, he redid his expense report and put it in as car insurance. This is 1960. This is Air Force Captain Joe Kittinger. He's at 102,000 feet. Lord, take care of me now, he said. He dropped more than 16 miles in 4.5 minutes before his parachute opened, and he landed safely. He then wrote the article for the magazine. This is Tim Severin in 1977. He reported sailing successfully a leather boat from Ireland to Newfoundland to prove the 16th century monk, St. Brendan, could actually have made that crossing. We're not sure when this was taken, but it really is representative of the power of mystery. Dr. Sterling Matthews is measuring a 10-ton head left behind by the Olmecs in Veracruz in 1200 AD. How could they have moved this 10 miles from its source without aid of a whale or domestic animals? It is the same kind of engineering enigma that we have been investigating for decades that's at Easter Island. There's no escaping our fascination with Everest. This is in 1963. The climbers of America's first Everest expedition approached the South Summit, or with Titanic. So what has happened to exploration and the great explorers? Well, I think it's alive and well. And yes, for ourselves, we're discovering, bankrolling young explorers, emerging explorers, explorers in residence, giants like Sylvia Earle and James Cameron, and you're certainly going to hear a lot about ocean-going ways, Wade Davis. We've got a roster of stunning newcomers. But I want to take you back to May 1894, when the members of the National Geographic Society were attending a lecture on, quote, the Great Forest of Gaboon by 63-year-old Paul de Chaillot, perhaps the first Western explorer to see gorillas in the wild. Well, by then, Africa was no longer the dark continent. The Congo River had been traced. Sources of the Nile had been discovered. Still unexplored was the Arctic, the Antarctic, Arabia's empty quarter, New Guinea highlands, interior Alaska, the great stretches of the Amazon River. By 1987, all that had been mapped. Only the oceans really remained to be explored. And the thing that Gil Grosvenor, then the editor, said that you got asked more than anything else is there anything on Earth left to explore? Well, I want to take you back to Gabon, but this time it's September 20th, in 1999. Mike Fay entered a remote northern forest of the Republic of Congo, which included the great jungles of coastal Gabon, with an aging pygmy named Dukunda, who took a big machete and cleared the trail, 15 months, covering 1,200 miles of untamed Africa on foot, crossed 2,000 bodies of water, saw 200 gorillas, only 5 humans. The goal was to construct a portrait of great Central African forests before they became ruined. It led to the government protection of huge swaths of Gabon. Now, Fay gets the glory. Here he is. But the astonishing photos that Nick Nichols took were the really remarkable thing. And I want to tell you, here's a guy who's just a photographer, right? Just a photographer. Doesn't think of himself as an explorer. And one day he comes into my office, he's just back. He's sort of yellow because he's dealing with a bout of hepatitis. And I can't do this very well, but let's pretend there's a wall here. And for about 20 minutes during the conversation, he's rubbing his back and forth across the wall. I cannot figure out what this guy's doing. And he's telling me about all these amazing things that have happened in the jungle. And finally, I asked him, what's going on with your back? And he said, well, he took his jacket off. Then he said, pull up my shirt. So I pulled up his shirt. And there's a huge lump in the middle of his back. And he said, the nurse, National Geographic has a nurse on duty, says, I can't open that for 2 more days. I said, what is that? And he said, it's a botweevil nest in my back. So, you know, Fay got all the glory, but Nick got the bot weevils. So have we explored everything? Hardly. We know nothing about 70% of the Earth, the oceans. At 57, James Cameron last March rode his vertical torpedo into the Mariana Trench's Challenger Deep. Earth's deepest, most alien realm. He's the first human to reach the 6.8 mile deep valley at the bottom of the ocean, solo, in a 43-inch wide cockpit. The descent took 70 minutes. Remarkable. Now, moving from the area of the elite, we are now moving to the area of the citizen explorer. Broadening what an explorer can be. This is a picture of a friend of mine, if I can get it to go. Peter Jenkins was an unknown Tennessee farm boy who decided he would walk across America. He's barely out of college, and it took him about a year to do. And he ignited a sort of fever of discovery, and he stretched people's imagination, because just this common person could take an adventure and change how we looked at the world. All of us recognize the pull of the unknown. What Rudyard Kipling wrote about in the late 1800s in The Explorer. Something hidden. Go and find it. Go and look behind the ranges. Something lost behind the ranges. Lost and waiting for you. Go. The ranges change, but the drive doesn't. Let's face it. Jobs, Gates, Andreessen, Bezos, Zuckerberg. Our greatest entrepreneurs are simply great explorers, pushing the bounds of discovery. But here's the thing. We're all explorers, or we can be, as long as we are curious and open to simple truths, or new ideas alien to the commonplace. And the simple truths come at the most common times, and I'll give you an example of that. I can tell you all about the country of Burma. I can tell you how much people make there. I can tell you about the social makeup of the country. But I'm going to tell you one story that happened when I decided to get off the boat at 6 o'clock in the morning on the Irrawaddy River and go into an area that I'd never been to before, obviously. I went up to a guy in a horse-drawn cart, and I asked him in English if he would take me to a village nearby. He spoke a little bit of English, and I got in, and he trotted off, and I tried to make conversation with him. And I asked him if he'd seen any Americans, in the last year, and he said, 2, 3. And I said, well, what do you remember? And he said, tip. And I said, oh, like, how much? What kind of tip? And he said, $100. I went, wow, what did you do with $100? And he said, I bought a home. And that's exploration, too. That's the thing of discovery. It's going somewhere and asking the question, finding things that you didn't know about the world. Exploration can tempt death, as James Cameron did 6 months ago, or it can invite extreme discomfort. I think of what Teddy Roosevelt once wrote for us in the 1960s. He said, in the wilderness, people think of danger from Indians and alligators and jaguars. They are not the things you mind. It is the mosquitoes, the poisonous ants, the maribondo wasps that are perfectly awful. It is the boroshitus and the plum flies, like the black flies of the North Woods, only worse. The day after I threw away my spare clothing, ants ate up my underwear. These were white ants. The driver ants tried to eat the man instead of the clothes. So we need to embrace, in the broadest sense, what exploration is all about, and we need to pass the baton on to the next generation with that in mind. We have a moral imperative now to create and nurture a next generation of explorers and expand the notion of what exploration really means. We just created something called the Digital Explorer. Digital Nomad is a kind of 21st century explorer for us, and it's in the social media world. Andrew Evans has been traveling the world for 2.5 years. He's got a huge following. He basically is the social media version of what our greatest explorers of the 1800s were. And we have to recognize that the explorer traveler is a change agent. And to that end, we're recognizing something that I think is incredibly important, that every one of us is deciding to look at the world differently. We are going out to be changed. We are exploring to be transformed. This is a program we just started called Travelers of the Year. It recognizes travel with purpose. It recognizes amazing people doing incredible things in amazing places. And it is the new version of travel. So I think that as you see the next folks come up here on the stage, the people who are real explorers, I'm just a traveler, you'll see how extraordinary exploration can be, but you need to bring it into your own lives. And you need to bring it into the lives of the next generation. The passport is the new diploma. Learning happens between the poles, not just between the walls of the classroom. We need to nurture a generation of explorers. Thank you.